So you think you'd be a great village healer, do you? A gentle, wise soul, wandering through sun-dappled fields, collecting herbs, and humming peacefully. You picture yourself as the respected cornerstone of the community, someone everyone turns to for help. That's adorable. In reality, you've just signed up for a career where your two main performance reviews are miracle worker and witch, with very little room in between. Success is just as dangerous as failure, and your only retirement plan is hoping you don't end up as kindling. Greetings, my dears. Settle in comfortably for another relaxing excursion into the absolute misery of the past. Take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy systematically dismantling any romantic notions you ever had about the past. Comment below with the medieval job you think you'd be assigned, and how long you'd last before getting fired or, exiled. I'm curious about your doomed career paths. You wake up not because of a gentle sunrise or the cheerful chirping of birds, but because the cold has finally won the nightly war against your pathetic excuse for a blanket. The damp seeps into your bones, a familiar, unwelcome guest in the one-room hovel that serves as your home, clinic, and personal laboratory. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, drying herbs, and the general, underlying scent of medieval poverty that no amount of lavender can ever mask. You don't have an alarm clock. Your motivation to get up is the gnawing emptiness in your stomach and the knowledge that if you don't treat someone's ailment today, you might not eat. Forget a morning coffee. Your first task is to make sure the strange collection of roots and fungi you left soaking overnight hasn't decided to grow legs and walk away. Your medical degree is from the prestigious University of my grandma Said So, and your entire practice is built on a rickety foundation of inherited wisdom, desperate improvisation, and a healthy dose of sheer luck. Your grandmother was the healer before you, and her final lesson was a demonstration on how to be conveniently unavailable when the blacksmith's prized pig got sick. A lesson you now appreciate. You stare at the rows of dried plants hanging from the ceiling, each one a potential cure or a potential fast track to your own funeral. Is this chamomile for calming the nerves, or the one that causes violent, soul-cleansing diarrhea? You'd better remember correctly. There are no labels, no sterile packaging, just your memory and the high-stakes game of botanical roulette you play every single day. Your first visitor arrives before you've even had a chance to chew on a piece of stale bread. It's Alara, her face a mask of panic, her knuckles white as she grips the doorframe. Her husband, Thomas, a man whose primary personality trait is being strong enough to lift an ox, has apparently been bested by a splinter. Not just any splinter, mind you. A festering, angry-looking wound on his forearm is oozing a substance, the color of spoiled cream cheese. It's swollen to the size of a small loaf of bread, and red streaks are traveling up his arm like highways to disaster. He's sweating, feverish, and looking at you with a terrifying mixture of hope and suspicion. Welcome to medieval healthcare, where do no harm is less of a commandment and more of a vague, often unachievable suggestion. You invite them in, trying to project a confidence you absolutely do not feel. Your hovel suddenly feels 10 times smaller, filled with the stench of infection and fear. Thomas groans and slumps onto the only stool you own, cradling his arm like a cursed relic. Alara explains he got the wound 2 days ago while fixing a fence. He, in his infinite masculine wisdom, decided the best course of action was to ignore. it in hope it would get scared and leave on its own. It did not. Now it's your problem. You're less of a healer and more of a crisis manager with a pouch full of leaves. You look at your tools. There's a rusty knife that you also use to cut your bread and questionable vegetables, a needle that's seen more tunics than flesh, and a collection of rags that might have been clean last season. Hygiene, as a concept, seems to have been invented by someone with far too much time and access to clean water, neither of which you possess. Your first step is to wash the wound. This involves a bowl of lukewarm, murky water you hauled from the village well an hour ago, a well shared by 20 families and their assorted livestock. As you dab at the wound with a rag, Thomas lets out a roar that shakes the dried herbs. From the rafters, you murmur comforting lies about drawing out the poison while trying not to gag. The red streaks are the real problem. You've seen this before. It's a race, and you have no idea where the finish line is or what happens if you lose. Your grandmother had a remedy for this. A poultice. Of course, a poultice. The answer to everything from a cough to a cursed goat. You go to your workbench, which is just a plank of wood laid over 2 barrels, and begin your work as a medieval pharmacist. You grab a handful of yarrow to stop the bleeding, even though it's already past that stage. You add some moldy Bretta, surprisingly effective ingredient you discovered by accident when you were too hungry to care about the green bits. Then comes the main event, a generous dollop of fresh cow dung you collected this morning for its supposed drawing properties, mixed with a paste of crushed garlic and cobwebs. It smells exactly as horrific as it sounds. As you mash the ingredients together in a wooden bowl, you catch your reflection in a pail of water. Your face is smudged with soot, your eyes wide with the anxiety of a student taking an exam they haven't studied for, an exam where failing means the patient dies and you get blamed. You carry the bowl of horrors back to your patient, presenting it with the flourish of a gourmet chef. Alara looks like she's about to be sick. Thomas just looks resigned to his fate. You slather the warm, foul-smelling concoction onto his swollen arm, spreading it evenly over the angry red skin. The smell is overpowering. It's the scent of desperation. You then wrap the entire mess with one of your cleaner-looking rags, tying it off tightly. The instructions are simple. Leave it on for a day, pray to whichever god you think is listening, and try not to die. As payment, Alara hands you 2 eggs and a small, shriveled turnip. It's not much, but it's food. You accept it with a solemn nod, as if this transaction is perfectly normal and not a grim commentary on the value of a man's life. After they leave, the silence in your hovel is deafening. You're left alone with the lingering smell of infection and cow dung and the heavy weight of responsibility. Every successful treatment is just another future accusation waiting to happen. People in the village have long memories. They'll remember the time you saved Thomas's arm, but they'll also whisper about it. How did you know what to do? Where did this knowledge come from? It's a dangerous game. You sit down and finally eat your piece of stale bread, dipping it in a little water to make it chewable. You think about Thomas's arm. Did you use the right herbs? Should you have added the slightly glowing mushrooms you found by the creek? Probably not. You did what you could, what you have, which is the unofficial motto of your entire existence. Your best surgical tool, that bread knife, lies on the table, a humble reminder that you are straddling a very thin line. You are a beacon of hope for the desperate, but you're also one failed poultice away from being run out of the village with pitchforks. And the worst part? Another patient will show up tomorrow. They always do. You just have to hope they have a simple cough and not the plague. Although, at this point, the pay is probably the same. You sigh, pick up one of the eggs, and wonder if it's fresh. It's a small gamble, but it's the only kind you can afford to lose tonight. The next 2 days are a masterclass in sustained, low-grade panic. You try to keep busy sorting herbs, sweeping the floor with your sad little bundle of twigs, and generally projecting an air of someone who isn't consumed by the thought of a man's arm falling off because of your agricultural skincare routine. Every villager who walks past your door is, in your mind, a scout for a future angry mob. You jump at every unexpected knock, convinced it's Thomas's ghost coming to ask for a refund. You spend an entire afternoon reorganizing your dried mushrooms by level of existential dread they inspire. It is not a small collection. Then, on the third day, Ilara appears at your door again. Your heart plummets to your stomach and starts digging a trench. This is it. She's not carrying a pitchfork, but her expression is unreadable, which is almost worse. She says nothing, just pushes a small cloth bag into your hands. It's heavy. With a trembling hand, you open it. Inside are 3 silver coins. 3. This is more money than you've seen in a year. You look up, confused. A slow smile spreads across Ilara's face. Thomas's fever is gone. The swelling has vanished, and the wound is closing, leaving behind a scar that will serve as a permanent, terrifying advertisement for your services. You did it. The cow dung and moldy bread cocktail actually worked. A wave of relief so profound, it almost makes you dizzy washes over you. Your success rate is now 1 for 1, which in medieval medicine officially makes you a leading global expert. The relief, however, is quickly replaced by a new, more sophisticated flavor of dread. Congratulations, you've unlocked a new level of anxiety, performance anxiety. News travels fast in a village where the most exciting weekly event is watching. A cow successfully chew its cud. By evening, you are no longer the strange orphan who lives in the smoky hut. You are the healer, the one who saved Thomas the Strong from the brink of death with nothing but weeds and farm waste. People look at you differently. There's a new respect in their eyes, mingled with a healthy dose of fear. Your magic is clearly powerful, and powerful things are not to be trusted. Your days of quietly foraging for possibly poisonous berries are over. You are now a public figure, and the public is fickle. Your newfound fame brings you an entirely new category of client. The next morning, you're summoned by a flustered servant to the home of Oswald, the wealthiest farmer in the region, a man who owns more sheep than you've had hot meals. His wife, Beatrice, is unwell. You arrive at a house that has two entire rooms and windows made of actual, albeit murky, glass. It smells of beeswax and roasted meat, a stark contrast to your hovel's signature scent of damp desperation. Oswald, a man with a face like a grumpy potato, explains the situation in hushed tones. His wife is suffering from a deep melancholy. She refuses to get out of bed, weeps for no reason, and claims a shadowy weight is pressing on her soul. She doesn't have a festering wound you can slather with dung. She doesn't have a fever you can try to sweat out. Her ailment is invisible, intangible. She doesn't need a healer. She needs a spa day and a therapist. Two concepts that are approximately 600 years and a continental shift away from being invented. You are escorted into a dim, stuffy room where Beatrice lies in a massive bed, buried under a mountain of furs. She looks pale and listless. This is a disaster. Your entire medical practice is based on visible, disgusting symptoms. This is like asking a plumber to fix a broken heart. You have to do something, so you begin your diagnostic process, which is 90% creative storytelling and 10% checking to see if the patient is actively on fire. You feel her forehead, cool. You look at her tongue, unhelpfully pink. You ask a series of questions that you invent on the spot, trying to sound profound. Has the balance of your humors felt imbalanced? You ask with a serious frown. Have you recently consumed an excess of cold foods, like cucumber, or heaven forbid, a melon? Beatrice just stares at you with empty eyes. Oswald, however, nods along, impressed by your scientific jargon. In the Middle Ages, mental health was just another term for being possessed by a mischievous but low-energy spirit. You realize you have to produce a diagnosis. Thinking back to a dusty text your grandmother once owned, you declare that Beatrice is suffering from an excess of black bile, leading to a profound and chilling sadness. It sounds official. It sounds learned. It's complete nonsense, but it's the best you've got. Now for the treatment plan. You can't exactly give her a poultice for her soul, so you prescribe a regimen worthy of a modern wellness influencer. First, a tincture of borage and St. John's wort to be taken with warm, sweetened wine 3 times a day. It will taste vaguely floral and do absolutely nothing, but the wine might cheer her up. Second, you instruct her to spend at least 1 hour a day in the sun to counteract the coldness of her ailment. Third, you forbid her from eating anything gray. You're not sure why, but it sounds decisive. Finally, you tell her to listen to the cheerful songs of birds and to avoid, at all costs, the sound of weeping or sad music. You are essentially prescribing a placebo with the swagger and confidence of a Silicon Valley startup pitching a completely useless app. Oswald is deeply impressed. He pays you handsomely 5 more silver coins and thanks you for your incredible wisdom. You walk away with the coins clinking in your pouch, feeling less like a healer and more like a successful con artist. You've traded your integrity for job security, a transaction that feels surprisingly modern. As you head back to your hovel, you're caught in a moral quandary. You've just medicalized sadness and sold a bogus cure to a desperate family. On the other hand, you can now afford to buy bread that isn't actively growing its own penicillin. This is the tightrope you walk. Your success with Thomas made you a target of suspicion, but this is different. This is the kind of success that makes you a respected member of the community, as long as nobody ever figures out you're just making it all up as you go along. You're no longer just the person who deals with infected wounds. You're a purveyor of hope, a professional liar who brings comfort. And in a world this bleak, maybe that's a kind of healing too. Or maybe you're just a fraud who's getting better at it. The line is getting blurrier every day. The coins change everything. For the first time in your life, you have a buffer. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to buy bread that isn't stale, a portion of cheese that doesn't look suspicious, and even a new, thicker woolen blanket. This small taste of material comfort is intoxicating, but it's also terrifying. You now have something to lose. You start to see threats everywhere. Is the baker giving you a funny look? Or is he just tired? Is that a friendly wave from a villager? Or a subtle accusation? Your hovel, once a simple shelter, now feels like a fortress you must defend. A fortress filled with incriminating leaves and roots. Meanwhile, your cure for Beatrice's melancholy has become the talk of the village. Apparently, she was seen outside, supervising her servants and not weeping into her furs. Whether it was your borage tincture or just the placebo effect of being told to stop eating gray food, you've been credited with another miracle. You are no longer just lucky. You are gaining a reputation for being unnervingly effective. This is precisely when your first real competitor enters the ring. You've officially entered your first turf war, and your competitor has God on his payroll. Father Alistair, the village priest, has taken notice of your rising stock, and he is not pleased. He's a stern man with a jaw that looks like it was carved from granite and eyes that could curdle milk. His business model is eternal salvation, built on a foundation of prayer, penance, and a strategic collection of ties. Your model is maybe this weed will help, and you're suddenly cutting into his market share of hope. The conflict starts subtly. In his Sunday sermon, he speaks at length about the insidious nature of pride and the foolishness of placing one's faith in earthly remedies. He warns of cunning folk who use ancient, unsanctioned knowledge to achieve results that seem miraculous, but may be paving a path to damnation. He never says your name, but he doesn't have to. Every eye in the chapel darts furtively towards you. You feel 100 gazes on your back, each one a tiny pinprick of suspicion. He has sermons and the threat of eternal damnation. You have weird-smelling leaves and a growing anxiety disorder. It almost feels like a fair fight. The Cold War escalates into a direct confrontation over a new patient. A young boy named Finn, the weaver's son, is struck down by a violent fever. A crimson rash spreads across his small body, and he's caught in the terrifying grip of febrile seizures. The family is paralyzed with fear. The mother, a devout woman, sends for the priest. The father, a practical man who remembers what you did for Tanis, sends for you. This isn't just a house call. It's a medieval episode of Shark Tank, and the prize is this child's life and the village's trust. You arrive at their cramped one-room home, your bag of herbs in hand, only to find Father Alistair already in command of the scene. The small space is thick with the cloying smell of incense, and the priest is in full clerical garb, sprinkling holy water on the child's forehead and chanting in resonant, intimidating Latin. He's not just praying. He's performing, putting on a show of divine power for the terrified parents. He stops mid-chant to fix you with a look of withering contempt. It's a look that says, you and your pagan nonsense are not welcome here. You feel your confidence. A fragile construct at the best of times begin to crumble. You're trying to practice medicine while a man in a robe is attempting to evict a demon from a 7-year-old. It's not exactly an ideal environment for concentration. The parents look between you and the priest, their faces etched with a desperate, agonizing uncertainty. They are caught in the crossfire of the ultimate A-B test. Prayer versus poultice. You have to act. Ignoring the priest's theatrical sighing, you approach the child. Finn is burning up, his skin frighteningly hot to the touch, and his small body is twitching. You try to shut out the sound of Latin and focus. This is what you do. You deal with the physical, the tangible. You gently open the boy's mouth, check his throat, and examine the rash, all while Father Alistair makes pointed comments about the futility of worldly efforts in the face of God's will. Your new job title is apparently Chief Competitor. To divine will, you decide on a course of action. It's simple, practical, and feels hopelessly inadequate next to the priest's spiritual bombardment. You turn to the mother, and in a calm, quiet voice that is a deliberate contrast to the priest's booming Latin, you give your instructions. A tea brewed from willow bark to fight the fever, a cool compress for his forehead, a soothing poultice of oatmeal and chamomile to be applied to the rash to ease the itching. The mother, desperate for anything concrete to do, immediately begins to follow your instructions, which earns you another glare from the cleric. You are undermining his authority, replacing his mysterious rites with simple, actionable tasks. You've handed power back to the mother, and he cannot abide it. He declares that the child needs prayer and penance, not foul-smelling pastes. He tells the parents that the illness is a test of their faith, and relying on your hedge magic is a sign of weakness. The tension in the room is so thick you could cut it with your rusty bread knife. The father looks at you, then at the priest, and makes a decision. He asks Father Alistair to continue his prayers, but tells his wife to continue preparing your remedies. They are hedging their bets, building a firewall of both faith and folk medicine around their son. You've reached a stalemate. You have done all you can for now, so you leave your herbs with the family and retreat, leaving the priest to his incense and incantations. As you walk back to your hovel, the weight of the confrontation settles upon you. This is a new, dangerous game. Before, your enemy was disease and ignorance. Now, it's a powerful man who believes you are an agent of darkness, or worse, a competitor. The entire village is watching. If the boy recovers, who gets the credit? If he dies, who gets the blame? You have a sinking feeling you already know the answer. You've been publicly pitted against the church, and that is a battle you cannot possibly win. The village holds its breath, and you feel like you're suffocating along with it. The next few days are a public trial disguised as a waiting period. You can't go to the well without conversations stopping mid-sentence. You're not just a healer anymore. You're a political faction with a staff of one. The village divides into two camps. The God-fearing folk, loyal to Father Alistair, now cross the path to avoid passing too close to your hovel, some even making subtle signs to ward off evil, as if your mere presence could curdle their milk or blight their crops. Then there are the others, the pragmatists, the desperate ones, who give you small, almost imperceptible nods of solidarity. They've seen your results, and in a world where life is cheap and brutal, results matter more than dogma. You're a controversial public figure, the medieval equivalent of a trending topic that everyone has a dangerously strong opinion about. Father Alistair, meanwhile, seizes the opportunity to launch a full-scale marketing campaign. His next sermon is a masterpiece of passive-aggressive theology. He speaks of the devil's cunning, how Satan can mimic God's miracles to lead the flock astray. He talks about false idols and the sin of seeking easy solutions from dubious sources. He paints a vivid picture of a soul teetering on a precipice, being offered a helping hand by a shadowy figure. Will the soul wait for the grace of God, or will it grasp the hand of the deceiver? Father Alistair has set up a brilliant theological trap, and you're the main attraction. He's ensured that no matter the outcome, he can claim victory. If Finn dies, it's because your dark meddling interfered with God's will. If Finn lives, it's because the family's prayers were strong enough to overcome your corrupting influence. Then, after 4 long days, the news ripples through the village. Finn's fever is broken. The rash is fading. He sat up and asked for food. He is weak, but he will live. A collective sigh of relief sweeps through the community. But for you, the feeling is far more complex. The boy's parents are, of course, overjoyed. That evening, you find a sack of high-quality flour and a small wheel of cheese left silently at your door. It's a thank-you note from the pragmatist faction, a secret ballot cast in your favor. But you've won the battle, not the war. In fact, your victory has only made the war for public opinion that much more perilous. You've now succeeded 3 times. You cured an infection, eased melancholy, and vanquished a deadly fever. You are no longer just competent. You're starting to look infallible, and that is the most dangerous reputation you can have. Your success attracts a new and entirely unwelcome kind of attention. Congratulations, your brand has become so popular that actual self-professed witches now want to collaborate with you. Her name is Old Agnes, a woman who lives in a ramshackle hut deep in the woods, shunned by the village for her practice of a much more overt and spooky brand of magic. While you work with herbs and poultices, she works with charms, knotted cords, and muttered incantations that sound much less like prayers and much more like threats. She is your worst possible PR association. You're trying to cultivate an image of a serious, albeit unconventional, practitioner. Being seen with Agnes is like a doctor being endorsed by a psychic who reads goat entrails. Networking in the Middle Ages is mostly about trying to avoid people who might get you burned at the stake. She corners you one afternoon as you're foraging for mushrooms near the edge of the woods. You're so focused on distinguishing a chanterelle from its deathly toxic lookalike that you don't hear her approach. "Good eye," she rasps, her voice like grinding stones. You jump, nearly dropping your basket. It's Agnes. Her face is a roadmap of wrinkles. Her eyes are a roomy, unsettling blue, and she smells of damp earth and something vaguely like burnt hair. You have the sight for it, the gift. She smiles, revealing a notable lack of teeth. You and I, we are the same. Your blood runs cold. This is the one conversation you never wanted to have. You offer a weak, non-committal smile and try to back away slowly, but she follows. "I saw what you did for the weaver's boy," she says, in a low, conspiratorial whisper. "The priest, with all his holy water and Latin noise, he did nothing. You did. You have the power in you." She then makes her pitch. She suggests you could be allies. She knows secrets, she claims, far beyond simple herbs. Secrets of the moon, of blood, of bone. She talks about how to bind a thief's feet from afar, how to sour a rival's milk, how to assure a lover's faithfulness with a lock of hair and a chicken foot. She's offering you a career upgrade from herbalist to full-blown sorcerer, and you have absolutely no interest in that promotion. You are walking a razor's edge, trying to present your work as a natural craft. Agnes is offering to push you headfirst into the abyss of black magic. You have to refuse her, but you have to do it carefully. Accusing her of witchcraft is a death sentence, and making an enemy of a woman who genuinely believes she can curse you is a terrible idea. You're basically a small startup founder being courted by a black hat hacker. You must decline the offer with extreme politeness. You stammer something about your methods being simpler, inherited from your grandmother, and focused only on healing. You thank her for her generous offer, but say you're not worthy of such powerful knowledge. It's a weak, cowardly response, but it's the safest one you can think of. Agnes squints at you, her blue eyes seeming to pierce right through your flimsy excuses. She sees your fear, your desperation to disassociate from her. She cackles, a dry, rattling sound. As you wish. Healer, she says, drawing out the title with mocking emphasis. But the line between your work and mine is thinner than you think. The villagers don't see the difference. To them, it is all magic. When they decide they fear you more than they need you, remember that. She then turns and melts back into the woods, leaving you with a racing heart and her chilling words hanging in the air. She's right. That's the most terrifying part. You've spent all this time trying to build a wall between your safe practice and her dangerous magic, but to everyone else, it's all the same mysterious, frightening power. Your success hasn't made you safe. It has just painted a much larger target on your back. Old Anne's words haunt you, clinging to your thoughts like a damp fog. The line between your work and hers is thinner than you think. You try to dismiss it as the rambling of a bitter outcast, but the fear she planted takes root. Your reputation has become a monster that you can no longer control, and is always hungry for the next miracle. You try to lay low, focusing on minor ailments, a farmer's bad back, a baby's colic. You start deliberately underselling your abilities, using phrases like, "This might help a little," instead of projecting confidence. You're trying to manage expectations, to shrink the target on your back, but it's too late. Your name is now synonymous with impossible cures, and the most powerful man in the village is about to call in your marker. The Reeve, a man named Godfrey, who acts as the local lord's enforcer and village administrator, summons you. His summons doesn't come via a polite request. It comes via a hulking man-at-arms who appears at your door and informs you that your presence is required immediately. It's not an invitation. It's a command. You've been summoned by the medieval equivalent of the district manager, and a family member's health is your new, terrifying key performance indicator. You are escorted to the Reeves house, the largest and most fortified dwelling in the village, a place that makes the wealthy farmer's home look like a shed. Inside, the air is tense. Reeve Godfrey, a man with a perpetually furious expression and a well-fed gut, explains the situation. His elderly mother, Elspeth, had collapsed without warning an hour ago. She is alive, but she cannot speak or move her left side. He looks at you, his eyes small and hard. He has heard the stories. He has heard you are a miracle worker. He is not asking for a cure. He is demanding one. Failure is not an option. It's a grim, looming reality that's about to hit you squarely in the face. You are brought to the old woman's bedside. She lies still, her face slack on one side, her eyes open but vacant, a thin line of drool trickling from the corner of her mouth. Her breathing is shallow. You feel a cold pit of dread open in your stomach. You've seen this once before, years ago. This is no fever. This is no infection. This isn't something you can fight with herbs or draw out with a poultice. A vital cord inside her head has snapped. You know with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that there is nothing you can do. You are utterly, completely, and hopelessly out of your depth, but you can't show it. The Reeve is watching your every move, his grief quickly curdling into an impatient anger. You have to perform the ritual. You go through the motions, a hollow pantomime of healing. You feel her pulse, which is faint and erratic. You hold a polished silver coin up to her mouth to check her breath. You mutter sagely about a sudden, catastrophic imbalance of the humors, a blockage of the vital spirits in the brain. It's all meaningless jargon, a flimsy shield against the Reeve's expectation and the horrifying reality of the situation. This isn't medicine. It's palliative care theater for an audience of one very powerful, very angry man. He asks you what you will do. The question hangs in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. You have to give him something. You prescribe the gentlest, most harmless thing you can think of, a warm broth infused with rosemary and thyme to fortify her spirit, and a gentle massage of her limbs with lavender-scented oil to encourage the flow of energy. You prescribed a gentle soup for a catastrophic neurological event. It's like trying to fix a plane crash with a single Band-Aid. You explained that the recovery will be slow, that the spirit needs to be coaxed back into the body. You are buying time, but you both know it's a lie. You can see the doubt hardening in his eyes. For the next 2 days, you are a prisoner. De Reeve insists you stay at his house to personally administer the treatment. You sleep on a pallet on the floor outside Elspeth's room. And every few hours you are called in to perform your useless rituals. You watch her fade. Her breathing becomes more ragged. Her skin takes on a grayish pallor. You are a helpless witness to death's slow, methodical victory. On the morning of the 3rd day, she is gone. Silence fills the room, a profound and final silence that your herbs and oils could not hold back. You look up and meet the Reeve's gaze. There is no sadness in his eyes anymore, only a cold, hard fury. You realize your entire career has been built on a series of lucky guesses, and your luck has just run out in the most spectacular way possible. The fallout is immediate. You are dismissed from the house with a look of such utter contempt it feels like a physical blow. Before you've even made it back to your hovel, the story is already twisting and spreading through the village. You weren't a helpless healer who did her best. You were the arrogant magic user who failed. Father Alistair seizes his moment. At the woman's funeral service, which the entire village attends, he speaks of the dangers of hubris, of those who promise life but deliver only death. He warns that when one dabbles in powers they do not understand, tragedy is the only possible result. He has all the proof he needs now. Your success with the Weaver's boy was the devil's trickery, a lure to draw in a more important soul, to be destroyed. It makes a terrifying kind of sense. In the court of public opinion, your previous miracles are now re-examined as circumstantial evidence against you. Saving Thomas's arm? A fluke. Curing Beatrice's sadness? A charlatan's trick. The Reeve, consumed by his grief and rage, needs a target for his anger. And you are the perfect scapegoat. The whispers that follow you are no longer tinged with fear and respect. They are sharp with accusation. The line old Agnes spoke of has been crossed. You are no longer the village healer. You are the village killer. The air in the village grows thick and poisonous. Former clients now avert their gaze, clutching their children closer as you pass. The sack of flour from the weaver feels less like a gift and more like a liability, a piece of evidence marking you as a conspirator. Your hovel, once your sanctuary, now feels like a trap. Every creak of the door, every rustle of leaves outside, sends a jolt of pure adrenaline through you. You are no longer just an unpopular figure. You are a marked woman, living on borrowed time. The social contract in your village is brutally simple. Be useful until you are perceived as a threat, at which point you become disposable. Your brief career as a folk hero is over. The season finale was supposed to be your trial, but it appears to have been canceled in favor of a direct-to-execution special. The end comes on a cold, moonless night. You're huddled under your new, warm blanket, a bitter irony when you first hear it. It's a low rumble, a distant sound of angry voices, and the rhythmic clang of metal. It's the sound of a community that has found its scapegoat. The noise grows louder, closer. Torches flicker through the cracks in your wall, casting dancing, monstrous shadows inside your hut. Your hovel is no longer your home. It's Exhibit A in the case against you. There's a thunderous bang on your door, followed by the splintering of wood. Witch! The voice is the Reeves, raw with hatred. Murderer! Come out and face your judgment. Judgment. You know exactly what that means. It means a swift, brutal consensus, fueled by fear and grief, with Father Alistair providing the religious justification and the Reeve providing the rope. Your 5-star reviews from former patients have officially been turned into evidence for the prosecution. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through you. You have seconds. Your eyes dart around the tiny space that contains your entire life. The herbs, the roots, the pots, all tools of your trade, now rebranded as instruments of evil. There is no time to gather anything of value, no time for sentiment. Survival mode has been activated, and it involves a lot more running and a lot less poultice making. You remember a loose plank behind your sleeping pallet, a flaw in the construction you'd always meant to fix. Now it's your only way out. As another blow shatters your door, you scramble across the dirt floor, wrench the plank free, and squeeze through the narrow opening. The cold night air hits you like a slap. You are behind your hut, plunged into darkness. The sounds of the mob now terrifyingly close as they pour into your empty home. You don't hesitate. You run. You sprint towards the one place that might offer you cover, the woods. The same woods where you once peacefully foraged for remedies, now your only hope for asylum. Branches whip at your face, thorns tear at your tunic, your lungs burn, and every snapping twig behind you sounds like an approaching footstep. The shouts of the mob fade slightly, but you know they will search for you. The Reeves' vengeance will not be satisfied by simply ransacking your home. You keep running, fueled by a terror so profound it eclipses all other sensations. You are no longer a healer, a neighbor, or even a person. You are prey. After what feels like an eternity, when your legs are screaming and your breath comes in ragged, painful gasps, you allow yourself to collapse at the base of an ancient, gnarled oak tree. The sounds of pursuit have faded, for now. You are alone, shrouded in the oppressive darkness of the forest. The cold, a familiar enemy, begins its slow work, seeping into your exhausted body. You have nothing. The coins you earned, the blanket you bought, the small comforts that briefly made your life bearable, all gone. You have only the torn clothes on your back and the crushing weight of your new reality. You are an exile, a fugitive. Your name is a curse in the only home you have ever known. A bitter, hysterical laugh bubbles up in your throat. You look up through the canopy of black branches at the sliver of a hostile moon. You tried to lessen the misery of the past, and all you accomplished was to become another one of its miserable statistics. You finally learned the most important and most brutal medical lesson of the Middle Ages. Sometimes the only person you can possibly save is yourself. And as you huddle in the darkness, you realize your success did, in fact, lead to a death. The death of your life, your home, your name. You are about to be downsized from your role as the village healer in the most permanent way imaginable. And your only severance package is the desperate, fleeting chance to survive until sunrise. The woods are silent, but in your mind, the whispers of the village are louder than ever. Ah, dragons. Those magnificent, fire-breathing symbols of power and majesty. They soar through fantasy realms, hoard gold, and occasionally deign to roast a night for a light snack. We all love a good dragon story. But what if I told you that the origins of one of the most legendary dragon dynasties were less about mythical beasts and more about, well, let's just say some decidedly human failings, a hefty dose of backstabbing, and the kind of family drama that would make a reality TV producer weep with joy? Forget your noble lineages and ancient prophecies. This is a tale where dragon blood might just be a euphemism for suspicious parentage, and the path to power is paved with broken vows and conveniently forgotten histories. Greetings again, my dears, since you clearly haven't had enough historical unpleasantness. Prepare yourselves for another deep dive into the murky swamp of the past. You know the drill by now. Like and subscribe if you enjoy historical narratives served with a generous helping of cynicism. And while you're at it, comment below with what mythical creature you think would have the most hilariously mundane origin story. I'm picturing a griffin that's just a grumpy eagle with self-esteem issues. The wind howled through the stone corridors of the ancient fortress, carrying with it the scent of pine and the distant roar of the sea. You find yourself a fly on the wall, or perhaps a particularly inconspicuous tapestry within the imposing stronghold of House Valyriers, a family whose sigil, a three-headed serpent coiled around a burning sword, already hints at the delightful levels of interpersonal conflict to come. Lord Theron Valerius, the current patriarch, is a man built like an oak and about as subtle in his pronouncements. He paces his solar, his heavy boots thudding on the flagstones, a storm brewing in his gray eyes that has less to do with the tempest outside and everything to do with his utterly disappointing progeny. His eldest son and heir, Kaelin, is, well, let's just say if charisma and political acumen were diseases, Kaelin would be in perfect health. He possesses the intellectual curiosity of a particularly stubborn mule and the strategic foresight of a startled chicken. Lord Theron had envisioned a glorious future for his house, a dynasty that would carve its name into the annals of history with sharp steel and even sharper alliances. Instead, he's looking at a future where his legacy might be accidentally traded for a slightly dented helmet and a poorly trained hunting dog. His second son, Lysander, is marginally more promising. He possesses a certain cunning, a viperous charm that allows him to slither through courtly intrigues. However, Lysander's ambition burns hotter than any forge, and it's generally agreed that he would sell his own grandmother for a slightly better seat at the royal banquet. Which brings us to the crux of Lord Theron's current existential crisis: the distinct lack of a suitable grandchild to carry the Valeria's name with any degree of competence, let alone glory. Kaelin has yet to produce an heir, his marriage too, the rather bland Lady Alara being remarkably fertile in producing absolutely nothing. Lysander, ever the pragmatist, has focused his attentions on currying favor at court rather than securing a dynastic future for his own branch of the family. Lord Theron sighs, a sound like rocks grinding together. He needs an heir, and he needs one soon. The king is aging, the political landscape is shifting like sand dunes in a gale, and House Valeris needs a strong hand on the tiller to navigate the treacherous waters ahead. And then there's Seraphina. Ah, Seraphina, Lord Theron's niece, orphaned at a young age and taken into his household out of a sense of familial duty that he's regretted approximately every Tuesday since. Seraphina possesses a sharp wit, a keen intellect, and an uncanny knack for understanding the nuances of power. She's also female, which, in the patriarchal society of the time, makes her about as useful for continuing the family line as a chocolate teapot in a siege. Seraphina spends her days overseeing the household affairs, managing the estate's finances with a shrewdness that puts both of Lord Theron's sons to shame, and generally being far too competent for her own good. She has opinions well reasoned, arguments, and a disturbing habit of being right. Lord Theron often finds himself seeking her counsel on matters of state, much to the simmering resentment of Kaelin and the barely concealed amusement of Lysander. Today, however, Seraphina is the furthest thing from Lord Theron's mind. He's fixated on the upcoming royal tournament, a grand spectacle of martial prowess designed to impress foreign dignitaries and distract the populace from the ever-increasing tax burden. Kaelin, bless his cotton socks, is scheduled to participate, a prospect that fills Lord Theron with a unique blend of hope and impending doom. Hope that perhaps, by some miracle, Kaelin will manage to unhorse at least one opponent without accidentally impaling himself. Doom because the very public humiliation of his heir is almost guaranteed. Lysander, ever the opportunist, sees the tournament as a chance to ingratiate himself with potential allies, while discreetly placing bets on anyone fighting against his oafish brother. Seraphina, as usual, remains a cool observer, her sharp eyes missing nothing. The tension in House Valeris is a palpable thing, a thick, unspoken drama that hangs in the air like the humidity before a storm. And in the midst of this familial pressure cooker, a seemingly insignificant event is about to occur, a spark that will ignite a fire that will consume not just House Valerius, but the entire kingdom, giving birth to a dynasty built on secrets and a rather creatively interpreted family tree. It starts with a chance encounter in the castle gardens, a stolen moment under the pale moonlight, and a decision that will alter the course of history in ways no one could possibly foresee. You lean closer, your metaphorical ear pressed against the cold stone walls, eager to witness the first crack in the foundations of this so-called dragon dynasty, a dynasty that, you suspect, owes less to mythical beasts and far more to the timeless art of human deception. The castle gardens, under the sterile light of a full moon, were Seraphine's only true sanctuary. It was a place where the suffocating weight of courtly expectations and the drone of her cousin's inadequacies seemed to fade, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine. She wasn't contemplating romance or dreaming of a dashing savior. She was contemplating the estate's ledgers, mentally calculating grain yields, and wondering if she could reallocate funds from the new tapestries for the West Wing budget, too, reinforcing the northern wall before it collapses. She was the brains of the entire Valera's operation. The only problem was, the operation wasn't hers to run. It was on this night that she encountered him. He wasn't a Valeria's man, nor did he have the peacocking swagger of the southern lords who had arrived for the tournament. He stood near a moon-dappled fountain, a tall silhouette against the stone, his armor dark and unadorned save for a strange coiled serpent etched onto his gauntlet. Meet Ser Rorik, a knight whose backstory was as vague as a politician's promise. He hailed from a misty, barely charted region known as the Serpent's Fen, a place most highborn lords considered little more than a swamp filled with rebellious peasants and an unhealthy number of reptiles. When he turned, there was no courtly deference in his eyes, only a calm, appraising intelligence. He didn't see a noblewoman, a pawn in the game of marriage alliances. He saw a person. A fine night to escape the noise, he said, his voice a low baritone that seemed to absorb the sounds of the garden around it. Seraphina, normally guarded, found herself disarmed. The noise, she replied with a wry smile, is a permanent feature of this castle. One merely learns to find the quieter corners. Their conversation began not with stilted pleasantries, but with a shared observation about the constellations, which led to a discussion on the history of celestial navigation, and then to a debate on the economic policies of the neighboring kingdoms. While her cousin Kellen's primary struggle that evening was with a particularly tricky buckle on his new tournament shin guard, Seraphina was engaging in a far more dangerous and thrilling activity, a conversation with an intellectual equal. Rorik spoke of his travels, of strange customs in the east and forgotten ruins in the south, but he spoke of them as a scholar, not a braggart. He listened to her insights on trade and governance with a genuine interest that was utterly alien. To her, this wasn't a budding romance in the traditional sense. It was an intellectual jailbreak. You're witnessing the genesis of a conspiracy, currently disguised as a pleasant chat about political theory. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Lord Theron's family dinner had all the warmth and joy of a tax audit. Kalen, having finally conquered his armor, was now struggling with a roasted quail, managing to send a greasy piece flying onto the lap of a visiting dignitary. Lysander, ever the dutiful son, offered a silken apology on his brother's behalf, while subtly signaling a servant to refill the dignitary's goblet with the strongest wine, no doubt to loosen his tongue later. Lysander collected secrets like other men collected coins, and in a place this full of ambition and resentment, he was quickly becoming the wealthiest man in the castle. Lord Theron watched the pathetic display, his jaw tightening. His legacy was a buffoon and a snake. He looked at his daughter-in-law, the meek Lady Alara, who seemed to be trying to merge with her chair to avoid being noticed. He saw no strength. There, no fire, no hope for a grandson who could salvage their family name. His gaze swept the hall, a desperate king surveying a barren kingdom. The Valerius line felt like it was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and his own sons were cheerfully giving it a nudge. Back in the garden, the moon had climbed higher. The connection between Seraphina and Rorik had deepened into a quiet understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of two sharp minds, finding each other in a world that valued brute strength and blind obedience above all else. When she finally retreated to her chambers, it was with a sense of exhilaration she hadn't felt in years. She had been seen, truly seen, for the first time. The seed of betrayal had been planted, not out of malice, but out of a desperate human yearning for recognition. It was a betrayal of the role society had assigned her, a quiet rebellion against the fate of being a clever ornament. And as you watch her stare out her window, not at the moon, but towards the guest wing where the mysterious night was quartered, you know that this is only the beginning. The Dragon Dynasty wouldn't be born of fire and conquest, but here, in the silent, treasonous hope of a woman who was tired of being underestimated. The day of the royal tournament dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for public pageantry and even more public humiliation. The air buzzed with the energy of the crowd, a sea of commoners and nobles alike, all thirsty for entertainment. For the nobility, the tournament was less a genuine display of martial prowess and more a high stakes public performance review, and the Valerios family was about to get a failing grade. Kalin, clad in gleaming steel armor that was worth more than a small village, looked impressive until he started moving. He trotted his warhorse onto the field with a determined frown, looking less like a fearsome warrior and more like a man, trying to remember if he'd left the oven on. His opponent was a grizzled veteran from the Stormlands, a knight whose face was a testament to a life of actual conflict, not just practice drills. The trumpets blared. Kalin lowered his lance, aimed and charged. He charged with all the focused grace of a wardrobe, falling down a flight of stairs. He missed his opponent completely. His lance sliced through empty air 6 feet to the left of the other knight, while the veteran, with an almost bored expression, landed a solid, crisp blow to Kellen's chest. The heir to House Valeriers was thrown from his saddle in a clatter of expensive metal and shattered dignity, landing in the dirt with a thud that was heard all the way back in his father's dark, scowling corner of the stands. Kalin didn't just lose the joust. He lost any remaining shred of his father's respect, which was already a heavily devalued currency. From her seat, Serafina felt a familiar wave of second-hand embarrassment mixed with pity. In the row below, she saw Lysander, who hadn't even been watching. He was deep in conversation with a portly baron, no doubt leveraging his brother's spectacular failure into some sort of political advantage. He was playing 4D chess in the stands, while his brother was failing to even play checkers on the field. Lord Theron didn't move. He just stared at his son, the failed heir, being helped to his feet by squires, his face a mask of cold, hard disappointment. Then came Sir Rorik's turn. He rode onto the field without fanfare, his dark, unadorned armor a stark contrast to Kellen's polished finery. He was an enigma, a whisper from the fens, and the crowd murmured, unsure what to make of him. His opponent was a famously arrogant knight from the Reach, a man known for his flashy style. The trumpets sounded again. Rorik's charge was a study in brutal efficiency. There was no wasted movement, no theatrical flair. He was a straight line of deadly intent. His lance struck the Reachman's shield with the force of a thunderclap, exploding into a shower of splinters as the arrogant knight was launched from his horse as if fired from a catapult. Sir Rorik didn't just win. He was a walking, talking masterclass in how to be effortlessly terrifying. He proceeded to do this 3 more times, dispatching each opponent with the same chilling competence until he was declared champion of the joust. As he accepted the victor's laurel, his gaze swept the stands and for a brief moment met Seraphine's. He gave her a slow, almost imperceptible nod, a shared acknowledgement that was more intimate than any shouted proclamation of victory. It was then that you, the invisible observer, could see the exact moment the conspiracy truly began. Lord Theron, who had been stewing in a broth of pure despair, watched Ser Rorik's display of strength and control. He saw not just a skilled knight, but a solution, a raw, untamed element, unburdened by a powerful family of his own, that could potentially be harnessed for his own purposes. His eyes, cold and calculating, shifted from the victorious Rorik to the spot where Kaelin had been humiliated, and then finally they settled on his niece Seraphina. You can almost see the gears grinding in his mind, the rusty cogs of a desperate and brilliant plan smelling of rust and high treason. He saw her intelligence, her quiet strength, and he saw the way she looked at the champion. This is the moment. A terrible idea is born, dressed up in the respectable clothes of dynastic necessity. The problem wasn't just that his sons were useless. The problem was that the Valyrier's bloodline itself had grown weak. What it needed, he reasoned, was an infusion of new blood. Strong blood. Dragon's blood, if you will. And if he had to orchestrate the entire thing himself, so be it. The future of his house was at stake, and Lord Theron was about to betray everyone to save it. The tournament's celebratory feast was a loud, chaotic affair, but Lord Theron moved through it with the grim focus of a man on a mission. He had seen the future in Ser Rorik's victory and Kellen's failure, and he was now ready to launch the most audacious and illegal human resources plan in dynastic history. His first target was the champion himself. He found Ser Rorik not in the thick of the celebration, but observing it from a shadowed alcove, his demeanor that of an anthropologist studying a particularly boisterous tribe. Lord Theron dispatched a servant, and soon the mysterious knight was standing before him in the quiet of the Lord's solar. The job interview, you quickly realize, was less about Rorik's qualifications and more about his moral flexibility. Theron began with praise, lauding Rorik's unmatched skill. He then made his first move, offering the knight the prestigious and highly paid position of captain of his household guard. It was a handsome offer, one that would give a landless knight security and status for life. But it was just the appetizer. Theron spoke of legacy, of men with talent who are held back by the circumstances of their birth. He talked about the Valyria's house, its ancient power, and his deep, abiding need for men of strength and loyalty. He was selling a vision, and Rorik, ever perceptive, knew he was buying something more than a simple job. "You see a man of talent, my lord," Rorik said, his voice calm. "But what you require is a man of discretion. My loyalty, like my sword, has a price." He didn't accept or refuse. He opened negotiations. It was the perfect response. Theron smiled, a rare and unsettling sight. He had found his man. He dismissed Rorik, telling him to consider the offer, knowing the hook was set. The next piece of the puzzle was far more delicate. He summoned Seraphina. She entered the solar expecting to discuss the feast's dwindling wine supply or some other household matter. She did not expect to be handed the fate of her entire family. Theron didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You are the cleverest person in this castle, child," he began, a statement that was both a compliment and the preamble to a terrible burden. You see things as they are. You know Kalen is a fool. His wife is a ghost. This house, our house, will turn to dust under their stewardship. He let the brutal honesty of his words hang in the air. Serafina said nothing, her face a carefully composed mask, though you can see the flicker of shock in her eyes. Then came the proposition, a plan so monstrous, so disrespectful, and so utterly pragmatic that only a man as desperate as Theron could conceive of it. He wasn't just offering her a mission. He was offering her the keys to the future kingdom, hidden inside a box of absolute personal disgrace. He told her of his offer to Seer Rurik. He told her of the knight's strength, his lack of powerful connections that would make him a threat, his obvious intelligence. And then he laid out her role. She was to seduce the knight. She was to bear him a child, a son. That son, Theron explained with chilling calmness, would be presented to the world as Kellen's. Lady Alara, her cousin's wife, would be declared barren, a convenient and tragic excuse. The child, her child, Rurik's child, would be raised as the heir to House Valyriers. This is corporate succession planning, medieval style. If the designated heir is faulty, you secretly outsource production and replace the product line. Serafina stood frozen, the foundations of her world tilting violently. She was being commanded to sacrifice her honor, to engage in a profound and complex betrayal of everyone she knew. It was an order to become a vessel, a tool for her uncle's dynastic ambition. And yet, in the same breath, he was acknowledging her power. He was admitting that she, and she alone, had the strength and intelligence to execute such a plan. He was making her the secret CEO of the Valyria's bloodline. The plan was horrifying. It was also, you realize as you watch her, the best and only offer of real power she would ever receive. To refuse was to remain a clever, respected, but ultimately powerless spinster, watching her family crumble. To accept was to seize control of its destiny, to ensure her own blood would one day rule, all from the shadows. Lord Theron watched her, giving her the space to process the sheer treason of it all. This is not a request, he said softly, but with an edge of steel. It is the only path forward, for all of us. He left her there in the solar, the candle flames casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, making the coiled serpents of the Valyria's sigil seem to writhe and whisper. Serafina was no longer just an overlooked niece. She was now a co-conspirator in a plot to steal a legacy, the designated mother of a dynasty built on a lie. For a full day and night, Serafina existed in a state of suspended animation, her mind a whirlwind of cold calculation. The moral revulsion of her uncle's plan warred with its undeniable, ruthless logic. He had asked her to become a traitor, a liar, and an adulteress. But he had also, for the first time, treated her like a player in the game, not a piece to be moved. She walked through her duties, overseeing servants and checking ledgers, all while a silent, frantic negotiation took place in her soul. By the time the sun rose on the second day, she had made her decision. She was about to sign the most important and unwritten contract of her life, and its terms were shame, power, and treason. She would do it. Not for her uncle, and certainly not for the honor of a house that had sidelined her, but for the child. Her child, the one who would not be a fool or a snake, but a ruler. Her first move was to arrange a meeting with Sir Rurik. She sent a trusted servant with a message, and that evening they met in the castle's dusty, forgotten library. The air smelled of decaying paper and secrets. There was no pretense of romance. This was a business meeting. Seraphina, her voice steady and low, laid out the entirety of Lord Theron's audacious plan. She spared no detail, from the seduction to the public deception to the ultimate prize, their son on the Valyria's throne. She watched his face for any sign of shock or disgust. There was none. Rurik listened with the same focused intensity he'd shown in the jousting list. He was a man who understood power and its acquisition. When she finished, a long silence stretched between them. "My Lord Theron offers me security," Rurik finally said, his gaze unwavering. "You, my lady, are offering me a ghost kingdom. A legacy my son will own, but I never can. My name will be a whisper, my blood will rule, but I will remain a captain of the guard." "You will remain the man who made it possible," Seraphina countered, her voice sharp. "You will have the ear of the future lord and the gratitude of his mother. You will be a king in all but name, protected and powerful for the rest of your days. That is the offer." Their first romantic encounter was less about the heat of passion and more like the quiet, chilling ratification of a secret treaty. He slowly nodded. "The terms are acceptable." And just like that, the conspiracy was sealed. Welcome to Project Progeny, the most secret and high-stakes startup in the kingdom. Their affair began with the precision of a military campaign. Meetings were clandestine, timed to coincide with the changing of the guard or late-night council sessions. Their conversations were whispers in darkened corridors, their trysts stolen moments in rooms that were officially empty. There was an intimacy between them, but it was the intimacy of co-conspirators, of two people sharing a secret so vast it bound them together more tightly than any vow. This wasn't an affair of the heart. It was a hostile takeover of a bloodline, executed one secret meeting at a time. The rest of the castle remained blissfully, infuriatingly oblivious. Cailan spent his days complaining that his new tournament armor was too tight in the shoulders, entirely unaware that a hurricane of betrayal was forming just down the hall. Lord Theron watched from a distance, a silent, approving puppet master who had set his pieces in motion. The only wild card was Lysander. He was too observant, too clever. His superpower was sniffing out hypocrisy, and he was beginning to think the castle smelled very funny indeed. He noticed the new captain of the guard's privileged access to the Lord Solar. He noticed the way Seraphina, once dismissive of courtly life, now seemed to carry a new secret weight. He saw the subtle, shared glances between his sharp-witted cousin and the mysterious knight from the fens. Lysander didn't know what was happening, but his political instincts told him a new power dynamic was forming, and he wasn't at the center of it. He began to watch them, his eyes narrowed, collecting observations as he always collected secrets, waiting for the moment they would become valuable. The game was afoot, and the risk of exposure had just become terrifyingly real. Months bled into one another, a tense and silent passage of time for the conspirators. Then, one morning, Seraphina confirmed it. The hostile takeover of the Valyria's bloodline had been successful. She was with child. A quiet, triumphant look was exchanged between her and Lord Theron. A secret, dangerous joy was shared in a fleeting glance with Rurik across a crowded courtyard. The conspiracy had just produced its first successful proof of concept, and the project timeline was now 9 months of pure, uncut terror. With the first phase complete, Lord Theron moved to the second, public relations management for his treason. The first order of business was to neutralize Kellen's wife, the gentle and entirely blameless Lady Alara. He summoned her and Kylan to his solar, along with the castle's ancient, pliable Nestor, a man whose loyalty to the Lord was far more robust than his medical ethics. What followed was a masterclass in patriarchal gaslighting, served with a side of fake medical pronouncements. Lord Theron spoke with great, feigned sorrow about the lack of an heir. The Master then stepped forward, stroking his beard, and delivered a long, rambling diagnosis involving humoral imbalances, a cold disposition, and an unreceptive womb. He concluded, with the unshakable authority of his office, that Lady Alara was barren. Lady Alara was officially declared a dynastic dead end, a footnote in the story of a baby she would never have. Kalen, bless his simple heart, just looked, confused and sad, accepting his father's and the Master's words as absolute fact. Alara crumbled, weeping silently, her identity as a wife and noblewoman shattered in a single, cruel and completely fabricated medical opinion. With the problem established, Theron presented his unfortunate but necessary solution. Since an heir was paramount for the stability of the house, and since Seraphina was of Valeria's blood, she would perform a great and solemn duty. The story, as it would be told, was this: Kalen would lie with his cousin one time in a sanctioned, almost ritualistic act, purely for the purpose of conceiving an heir for the house. It was a lie so audacious, so publicly humiliating for everyone involved, that it had the perverse ring of truth. No one, it was reasoned, would ever invent a fiction that made them look so desperate and strange. Seraphina, who was summoned at the end of this meeting, had to play her part to perfection. She had to act shocked, then ashamed, and finally, reluctantly dutiful. It was a difficult acting job when you're secretly the architect of the entire future, and she performed it flawlessly, earning a look of grudging admiration from her uncle. The news spread through the castle like a foul smell. Most were too shocked to question it, accepting it as another bizarre quirk of the high-born. But one person heard the story and knew, with absolute certainty, that it was a lie. Lysander's internal fraud detector, already on high alert, began screaming louder than a stuck pig. A single ritualistic union? It was preposterous. It was a cover story, and a clumsy one at that. He knew his father was a master manipulator, and he knew Seraphina was too clever to be a simple pawn. This wasn't a sad duty. It was a coup, and they had left him out of it. His eyes narrowed. The players were his father, Seraphina, and he suspected his oafish brother Kalen, who was likely the only one who believed the official story. Lysander didn't have all the pieces, but he had the most important one, the knowledge that a conspiracy was underway to determine the next heir. He redoubled his efforts, his quiet observation turning into active espionage. He began watching Seraphine's movements, noting every servant she spoke to, every corner she turned. And he paid special attention to the new captain of the guard, the stoic Sir Rorik, a man who seemed to have risen very high, very fast. Lysander had no proof, but he had a theory, a sliver of suspicion that he would guard and nurture until it could be used as a weapon. The conspirators, meanwhile, were now trapped in their own fiction, forced to live out the humiliating lie they had created, all while the real secret grew in Seraphine's womb. The final months of Seraphine's pregnancy were the longest 9 months in the castle's history. The fate of House Valerius, the success of a treasonous plot, and the lives of 3 conspirators all rested on the outcome of a biological coin toss. The 9-month-long Stinger's baby experiment was finally over the day the midwives were summoned. After a day and a night of tense, silent waiting, a cry echoed through the stone halls. A healthy child had been born. And as the master, his face a perfect blend of solemnity and feigned surprise, announced that it was a boy, a collective secret sigh of relief was shared between a lord, a captain, and a new mother. The conspiracy had survived its most critical test. Lord Theron wasted no time. He had the infant swaddled in the finest silks, embroidered with the 3-headed serpent of their house, and personally carried him to the great hall. He presented the baby to Kaelin, whose face lit up with a look of pure, unadulterated joy. He accepted his new son with the uncomplicated delight of a man who has just been handed a very cute puppy, entirely unaware that it's actually a wolf cub destined to take everything from him. He was a father. He had done his duty. He was, for the first time in his life, an unequivocal success in his own eyes, and the irony was so thick you could have choked on it. The matter of the name came next. Kaelin suggested something traditional, like Theron II or Bartholomew. Seraphina, holding her son for the first time, spoke with a quiet but firm voice. "His name will be Draco," she stated, looking not at Kaelin but at her uncle. It was a bold, audacious choice. A name that meant dragon or serpent. It was less a name and more a mission statement for the brand they were building. Lord Theron. Understood immediately. It was perfect. It hinted at a power and a legacy far grander than their own. Draco Valerius, he boomed. A strong name for a strong heir. And so, the Dragon Dynasty was unofficially born, baptized in a lie, and named with a marketing slogan. Life in the castle shifted. Seraphina, once the overlooked niece, was now the mother of the heir, a position of immense, albeit subtle, power. She was still officially shamed by the circumstances of the birth, a role she played with masterful subtlety. But everyone knew that to get to the future lord, they had to go through her. Rorik, meanwhile, had to master the difficult art of looking like a proud and loyal employee when his own son, the company's new CEO, was being presented to the adoring court. He stood guard, his face a stony mask, watching another man be celebrated. For his virility, a quiet partner in the most successful firm in the kingdom. But as the conspirators settled into their new roles, their enemy was closing in. Lysander had watched the entire charade with mounting cynicism. A perfect, healthy son from a single, awkward, ritualistic encounter? It was statistically improbable, and dramatically convenient. The birth confirmed his suspicions, but he needed proof. He needed a weapon. He found it one night, weeks later. He had been tailing Seraphina, a shadow in the castle's shadows. He watched her slip away from the main keep and head towards the old guard tower where Sir Rurik had his private quarters. Lysander followed, his heart pounding with the thrill of the hunt. Through a crack in the heavy oak door, he watched the scene unfold. It wasn't a lover's tryst. Seraphina was holding the baby, Draco, and Rurik was looking at the child not with the detached respect of a guard captain, but with the raw, unguarded pride of a father. Then Lysander saw it, the smoking gun. Rurik produced a small, exquisitely carved wooden serpent, almost identical to the one on his gauntlet, and gently placed it in the infant's hand. The baby's fingers curled around the toy. In that moment, Lysander saw the shared look between them, a look of partnership, of shared risk and shared triumph. He finally had it. Not just a theory, but cold, hard, irrefutable proof. He was holding a political grenade with the pin pulled, just waiting for the most opportune moment to drop it and blow their entire carefully constructed dynasty to smithereens. He slipped away, back into the darkness, a smile playing on his lips for the first time in months. The game had just become his to win. Lysander now possessed a truth more valuable than any chest of gold and more dangerous than any army. But like the shrewd investor he was, he knew that revealing his asset prematurely would diminish its value. A public accusation would plunge the house into chaos, a messy and unpredictable outcome. He decided against using a match to burn the house down. He preferred a slow, controlled fire that he alone could manage, one that would let him reshape the entire structure to his liking. His opening move was a masterstroke of subtlety and menace. He requested a private audience with his father. Lord Theron, busy reviewing troop readiness reports with Sir Rurik, was annoyed by the interruption, but granted it. The meeting wasn't an accusation. It was an application for the position of chief blackmailer of House Valyrius. "Father," Lysander began, his voice smooth as polished stone, "I've been reflecting on our house's good fortune. The birth of young Draco is truly a miracle, a gift to us all after so much uncertainty." He paused, letting the word miracle hang in the air with heavy significance. "It secures the succession, and we must protect the succession at all costs." Lord Theron simply stared, his eyes narrowing. He knew this was not a courtesy call. "I find myself concerned, however," Lysander continued, circling the room as if inspecting it for flaws. "An heir so young is vulnerable. His influences must be carefully managed. For instance, our new captain of the guard, Sir Rurik, a man of great talent. I've noticed he takes a particular, one might say fatherly, interest in the boy's welfare. It's admirable, of course, but such devotion from a man of his ambiguous origins could be misinterpreted by our rivals." He spoke in the polite, poisoned language of the court, but every word was a sharpened knife aimed directly at the heart of their secret. He was letting his father know that he saw everything. Lord Theron realized with a sickening certainty that his son was not just a snake. He was a snake who had learned to set his own traps, using the lessons his father had inadvertently taught him. "What is your point, Lysander?" Theron's voice was dangerously low. "My point, father, is that in these uncertain times, the family must be united. Key responsibilities should be held by those with unquestionable loyalty and a true stake in our future." He stopped circling and faced his father directly. "The management of the Valyrians' trade routes and the treasury, for example. They have been managed by stewards for too long. They require the firm hand of a true son of the house. My hand." He didn't scream or threaten. He simply laid out his terms. He wasn't asking for a piece of the pie. He was letting them know he now intended to own the bakery. Lord Theron was trapped. To refuse was to call the bluff, a gamble he couldn't afford when Lysander might hold a winning hand. To accept was to show weakness, to confirm the blackmail, and to give Lysander the resources he would inevitably use to demand more. He chose the path of temporary survival. "Your newfound sense of duty is commendable," Theron said through gritted teeth. "I will consider it." The meeting was over. Lysander bowed and left, a small, triumphant smile on his face. Later that night, Lord Theron summoned not one but two people to his solar, Seraphina and Rorik. The atmosphere was no longer triumphant. It was cold with dread. He recounted the conversation with Lysander, word for venomous word. Seraphine's composure, usually so perfect, cracked. A flicker of fear showed in her eyes. Rorik's hand instinctively went to the pommel of his sword, his expression hardening. They were no longer just conspirators, hiding a secret from the world. They were now inmates in a prison of their own making, and Lysander had just appointed himself the warden. The conspirators had a new urgent project: internal threat management. And the threat didn't just have a key to the castle. He had a key to their ruin. Welcome to the next phase of the plot, a cold war fought in whispers and veiled threats across the dinner table. The Cold War within House Valerius began in earnest. Lord Theron, true to his forced word, granted Lysander control of the family's treasury and trade. It was like handing a wolf the keys to the sheep pen. Lysander moved with swift, surgical precision, replacing old family retainers with men loyal only to him, his influence spreading through the castle's financial veins like a poison. The family dinners, always a tense affair, now had the cheerful, relaxed atmosphere of a nuclear disarmament negotiation. Every polite request to pass the salt was laden with unspoken threats, every glance a strategic assessment. The paranoia among the three conspirators was suffocating. Rorik, a man of action, grew increasingly frustrated. His solution to the Lysander problem was simple, direct, and highly illegal. "He is a cancer," he argued to Theron in a hushed, late-night meeting. "You do not negotiate with a cancer, you cut it out." But Theron, for all his ruthlessness, was cautious. A dead son, even a treacherous one, would bring royal scrutiny they could not afford. Seraphina was caught in the crossfire, trying to mediate between Rorik's desire for a swift end and Theron's strategic caution, all while maintaining the public facade of a dutiful mother. Then Lysander, emboldened by his success, made his next power grab. He wasn't just taking over the family business. He was rewriting his job description to include Shadow King. He made a formal proposal at the Lord's Council meeting that, given Callan's obvious limitations and Seraphine's fragile female disposition, he should be named the official guardian and tutor to the heir, Draco. He was no longer content with controlling the money. He now wanted to control the future itself. It was a brilliant, public move that cornered Theron completely. To refuse would be to admit he didn't trust his own son, raising questions he couldn't answer. As the conspirators were reeling from this internal assault, a raven arrived carrying news that changed the entire game. The old king was dead. Just when you thought the internal politics of this one family couldn't get more toxic, the entire kingdom decided to throw its own succession into chaos. The new king, young and untested, would need to forge alliances, and he would seek out the strongest and most stable houses to support his reign. A great house like Valerius, perceived as being torn apart by infighting or, worse, built upon a scandalous lie, would be seen as a liability, not an asset. Lord Theron's carefully constructed house of cards was now standing in the middle of a hurricane, and Lysander had just turned on a giant fan. Lysander's timing was impeccable. He had made his boldest move during a national crisis, the political equivalent of looting during an earthquake. He knew that the pressure for House Valerius to appear strong and united was now immense, and he was positioning himself as the only viable source of that strength. The time for caution was over. That night, Theron, Seraphina, and Rurik met in a secret chamber deep beneath the castle, the air thick with damp stone and desperation. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows, making them look like the guilty ghosts they were becoming. "He has made his move," Theron stated, his voice devoid of all emotion. "He wants the boy. He wants to control the heir, and through him, control this house. And with the king dead, he knows we are at our most vulnerable." "We cannot give him what he wants," Seraphina said, her voice a steel wire. "He will not stop. He will bleed us dry, and then, when he is done, he will expose us for his own amusement." Rurik stood silently, his hand on his sword. His opinion on the matter was already well documented. Lord Theron looked from the determined face of his niece to the deadly resolve of his captain. The Cold War had been lost because Lysander was willing to risk mutual assured destruction, while they were not. But the calculus had now changed. The risk of letting Lysander live had finally become greater than the risk of killing him. Rurik was right, Theron said into the silence, his voice barely a whisper. "You do not negotiate with a cancer." He looked at them both, his eyes cold and hard as flint. The final item on the agenda for the conspiracy's board meeting had been tabled: hostile asset removal. "He has left us no choice. We must end this, permanently." There was no hesitation now, only the cold, grim mechanics of a necessary evil. The most important merger in the history of House Valerius was about to be finalized through a hostile liquidation, and the asset being liquidated was Lysander. Plan devised by Theron, refined by Seraphina, and to be executed by Rurik was a classic for a reason: a hunting accident. It was tragic, believable, and offered the perfect cover of chaos to project the required image of family unity to the full. New royal court, Lord Theron announced a grand boar hunt. He insisted all his sons be present. Kaelin was thrilled at the prospect of some manly sport. Lysander, smelling a trap, was deeply suspicious, but he could not refuse. To do so now, with the eyes of the kingdom upon them, would be an admission of disloyalty, painting him as the very agent of division he claimed to be fighting. He was forced to walk into the woods, knowing one of the beasts that was hunting him. The agenda for the boar hunt was 10% hunting and 90% planned fratricide. Deep in the ancient woods, as the horns blared and the dogs barked, the hunt began. Rurik, in his capacity as captain, directed the party with flawless efficiency. He subtly guided Lysander's group towards a denser, more isolated part of the forest known for its aggressive old boars. Then, at the height of the chaotic chase, it happened. A signal from Rurik sent two of his most trusted men to create a diversion, drawing the rest of the hunting party, including Kaelin, away. Lysander found himself suddenly, unnervingly alone. He knew, in the sudden silence of the forest, he surely knew what was coming. He turned, his hand on his own sword, but he was a courtly snake, not a hardened killer. Rurik emerged from the trees like an apparition. Lysander's life was ended not with a dramatic duel or a shouted accusation, but with a quiet, efficient, and brutally deniable act of workplace violence. It was over in seconds. Rorik dragged the body, inflicted a few deep, vicious cuts with a boar's tusk he'd brought for the purpose, and then, after waiting a suitable amount of time, raised the alarm, his voice filled with practiced horror. The official story would remember it as a tragedy. The three people who knew the truth would remember it as a successful and necessary business transaction. Lord Theron played the part of the grief-stricken father to perfection, his sorrow so profound, because, on some level, it was real. He had sacrificed his son for the future of his house. Kaelin was inconsolable, his genuine, simple-hearted grief providing the perfect authentic cover for the family's mourning. In the end, Lord Theron discovered the ultimate, if temporary, tool for achieving family unity: a well-timed funeral. In the months that followed, the new king, seeing a house tragically but strongly united under its old lord, cemented his alliance with House Valerius. The internal threat was gone, the line of succession was secure, and their secret was buried in a stone tomb, safe forever. And so, you watch as the years pass. Lord Theron rules into old age, a respected and powerful lord. Seraphina becomes the quiet, unmovable matriarch of the house, her wisdom guiding its every decision. Rorik remains the ever-loyal captain, the silent guardian of both the family and its founding secret. And young Draco? He grows into everything they had hoped for. He has his true father's strength and his mother's sharp mind. He is the perfect heir, the living embodiment of their great lie. The world would come to know his descendants as the Dragon Dynasty, a line of rulers famed for their cunning and their almost mythical strength. Legends would be spun about the dragon's blood that flowed in their veins. But you, the invisible, witness, know the truth. The dragon's blood that founded a legendary dynasty was nothing more than a cocktail of ambition, desperation, and murder. And the glorious house they built stands upon a foundation of bones, the bones of the son who was clever enough to see the truth, but not clever enough to survive it. So, you've been scrolling through too many cottagecore fantasies online, haven't you? You picture yourself in a quaint thatch-roof cottage, baking sourdough bread, tending to a lovely little garden, and living a simple, wholesome life in harmony with nature. That's adorable. Let's correct the record. Forget the harmony. Your life is a brutal, unending war against starvation, disease, and the crushing weight of a system designed from the ground up to keep you miserable. You are a peasant. More specifically, you are a serf, which is a polite way of saying you are human livestock. Your day begins not with the gentle glow of sunrise through a paned window, but with a pig snorting directly into your ear. That's because the pig, along with 2 chickens and your entire family of 5, shares the same one-room, smoke-filled, dirt-floor hovel you call home. The concept of privacy hasn't been invented yet, and even if it had, you wouldn't be able to afford it. The air is a rich tapestry of odors, unwashed bodies, animal waste, damp earth, and the lingering scent of last night's desperate attempt at a turnip stew. Your alarm clock is the gnawing, acidic emptiness in your stomach, a sensation so familiar. It feels like a part of your personality. You don't own this hovel. You don't own the small patch of mud outside you ironically call a garden. You don't even own the clothes on your back, which are essentially a few coarse burlap sacks stitched together with twine. Most importantly, you do not own yourself. You belong, body and soul, to Lord Fitzwilliam, a man you've seen exactly twice in your life, both times from a great distance as he rode by on a horse that eats better than your entire village. You are a feature of the land, a tool for its cultivation. You are less a person and more a long-term, unpaid, hereditary intern for a corporation you can never, ever leave. Your only retirement plan is the small plot in the churchyard, and you're expected to work until the very moment you occupy it. Your first task of the day is not to sip a warm beverage, but to stumble outside into the cold, damp misery of pre-dawn England. The world is a sea of brown and gray. Mud, thick and greedy, sucks at your bare feet because shoes are a luxury reserved for people who don't have to trade a month's worth of labor for a single leather hide. You join your father and older brother, their faces already grim masks of exhaustion, as you head to the fields. Not your fields, of course, the Lord's fields. The best, most fertile land is reserved for him. Your family gets a small strip of rocky, ungrateful soil to work for yourselves, but only after you've completed your required labor for the Lord. It's called a boon work, which is a hilariously cheerful name for institutionalized servitude. Today's task is plowing. The plow is a monstrous thing of heavy wood and a single iron tip, and your family's only asset is a sway-backed, half-dead ox named Bessie. She is your most valuable possession, and she looks as tired of this life as you are. Your father guides the plow, your brother prods the ox, and you walk alongside, your job being to clear the larger rocks and clumps of earth from its path. It is back-breaking, soul-crushing work. Every step is a struggle, every muscle in your back screams in protest. The wet cold seeps into your bones, a permanent resident you can never evict. Hours pass, marked only by the slow, agonizing journey of the sun across the sky. There's no witty banter, no cheerful whistling. The only sounds are your father's grunted commands, the squelch of mud, and the strained breathing of man, beast, all working in silent, shared misery. Around midday, you stop, not for a lunch break, but for a sustenance pause. Your mother arrives with the feast, a hunk, of course, black bread made from rye and whatever else could be swept off. The floor and a small flask of watery, sour ale. The ale is safer than the water from the local stream, which is used for washing, bathing, and as a toilet by the entire village. You devour your portion in seconds, the rough bread scratching your throat on the way down. It doesn't fill you, but it dulls the sharpest edges of hunger, providing just enough fuel to get you through the rest of the day. As you chew, you see him. The Reeve. He's the Lord's local manager, a peasant like you, but one who has clawed his way up to the lofty position of professional snitch and enforcer. He sits on a horse, a privilege granted by the Lord, and watches you, his eyes missing nothing. He is the living embodiment of middle management, a man who derives his only pleasure from exercising his petty authority over those with even less power than himself. He makes a note on a wax tablet. You're working too slowly. Your furrows aren't straight enough. That break was 30 seconds too long. Every infraction is a debt, another small piece of your life that you owe to the Lord. You and your family lower your eyes, finish your bread, and get back to work. The Reeves. Smug gaze burning into your backs. You are not just farming wheat. You are farming under constant surveillance, and your key performance indicators are misery and obedience. The day ends when the sun finally gives up, and sinks below the horizon. You trudge back to your hovel, your body a symphony of aches. But the work isn't over. There are chickens to feed, the pig to slop, and water to be hauled. Dinner is a repeat of lunch, maybe with some boiled cabbage if you're lucky. You huddle around the small, smoky fire, its meager warmth, a small comfort in a vast, cold world. You don't talk about your dreams or your hopes. You talk about the weather, the health of the ox, and the reeve's latest tyranny. Then you collapse onto your straw pallet, not to sleep, but to pass out, to steal a few hours of oblivion before the pig's snout in your ear tells you it's time to do it all over again. There is no weekend. There is no vacation. There is only the endless grinding cycle of serfdom, a wheel of suffering you were born on and will almost certainly die on. The sixth day of your relentless labor is followed not by a day of rest, but by a day of obligation. Sunday. In theory, this is God's day. In practice, it's just another day where you work for a different kind of master. The rest is theoretical. The tithing is very, very real. You don't get to sleep in. Instead, you spend the morning trying to make your family look semi-presentable for church, which is like trying to polish a collection of mud-caked potatoes. You wash your face in the same murky water you'll later use to boil your dinner, and you put on your only set of clothes, which happens to be the same set you've worn every other day of the week. The holes are just part of the ventilation. System. The village church is the only building you enter regularly that is made entirely of stone. It's cold, damp, and smells of ancient incense and parishioners' despair. You and your family file in, squeezing onto a rough wooden bench at the back. There are no pews for people like you. You sit in humble silence as Father John takes the pulpit. He is a man who is impressively well fed for someone who has taken a vow of poverty, his belly straining against the fabric of his vestments. He begins the service, as always, in Latin. You don't understand a single word. For all you know, he could be reading out a recipe for fish stew or reciting a list of his favorite types of cheese. The language is not meant for you to understand. It's meant to be a display of power, another barrier between you and the divine, one that only he can interpret. The sermon, when he finally switches to a heavily accented version of your own tongue, is always the same. It's a greatest hits collection of your moral failings. You are lazy, you are sinful. You must obey your betters, for they have been chosen by God to rule over you. Suffering in this life, he reminds you with a cheerful glint in his eye, is a down payment on a mansion in the next one. It's a brilliant business model, really. Demand everything from your clients in the present, with the promise of a glorious reward that is conveniently unfalsifiable and only redeemable upon death. After the spiritual shakedown comes the literal 1, the tithe. This is the 10% religious tax on everything you produce. And they mean everything. The reeve, ever present, stands near the church door with a ledger, alongside one of the priest's men. You are expected to bring your offering. 1 out of every 10 eggs your chickens lay. 1 out of every 10 bundles of wheat from your pathetic little strip of land. When your sheep has lambs, one of them belongs to the church. It is the original subscription fee, and you can never, ever cancel. Failure to pay in full results in a mark against your name, a debt to God that Father John will gleefully remind you of every single week until you settle it. You return from this uplifting experience to find a real-world disaster waiting for you, a fox. Sometime during the service, a fox had snuck into your hovel and made off with one of your 2 chickens. This is not a minor inconvenience. This is a catastrophe. A single chicken is a source of precious, protein-rich eggs, a buffer against starvation. In the grand scheme of your family's fragile economy, losing 50% of your poultry division is a devastating market crash. Your mother weeps. Your father's face, already a mask of grim resignation, seems to collapse further into itself. But the worst part is the bureaucracy. You cannot simply absorb the loss. The chicken, like the land and like you yourself, technically belongs to Lord Fitzwilliam. You are merely its custodian. Therefore, its loss must be officially reported. This means you must present yourself at the manorial court, which is held the next day. The court is not a place of justice. It's an administrative tool, a place where the Lord, through his steward or reeve, collects fines and reinforces his absolute power. It's less a courtroom and more the world's most depressing and punitive DMV. You stand before the reeve, who sits at a large wooden table, enjoying his role as judge, jury, and primary beneficiary of the proceedings. You explain, your voice trembling slightly, about the fox and the stolen chicken. The reeve listens, steeples his fingers, and feigns deep thought, as if you have presented him with a complex legal puzzle. Then he delivers his verdict. The fox, being a wild animal, cannot be punished. You, however, can. You are found guilty of negligence in the safeguarding of the Lord's property. You are, he declares with a self-satisfied smirk, responsible for the loss. Your punishment is a fine of 2 silver pennies. 2 silver pennies. You haven't seen a silver penny in your entire life. You don't have money. You pay the Lord in labor, in wheat, in your own miserable existence. The reeve knows this. The fine is immediately commuted to what he wanted in the first place: 3 extra days of boom work for your entire family, on top of your regular duties. It is a no-win situation, a perfect little loop of futile logic. You are the victim of a crime, so you report it to the authorities, who then punish you for being a victim. It's a customer service experience designed by a sadist. You walk away from the court, your shoulders slumped. You went in having lost a chicken. You came out having lost a chicken and 3 days of your family's life, labor that could have been spent on your own strip of land, trying to grow enough food to survive the coming winter. You have been punished for your own misfortune. That night, huddled on your straw pallet, the gnawing in your stomach is matched only by the burning injustice in your gut. The fox was just an animal, acting on instinct. The true predator, you, realize, is the system itself. The reeve, the lord, the priest, they are the beasts that you can never build a high enough fence to keep out, the ones who will devour you piece by piece, day by day, and call it justice. The seasons turn, bringing with them a familiar rhythm of suffering. The backbreaking labor of the harvest season arrives, where you work from before dawn until after dusk, gathering the Lord's wheat under the reeve's hateful eye. Your reward for bringing in a mountain of grain for the castle is a slightly larger portion of bread for a week. The system gives you just enough to keep you alive so you can continue working for it. It is during this period of exhaustion that the real disaster strikes, an event that makes a stolen chicken seem like a fond memory. The news comes down from the castle, delivered by the reeve with an air of great importance. Lord Fitzwilliam's eldest daughter is to be married. For the nobility, This means a week of feasting, tournaments, and political maneuvering. For you, it means only one thing. You are about to be bled dry. A wedding of this magnitude requires a special levy, a one-time tax to cover the cost of the celebration and the dowry. This is not a request. It is a demand backed by the full weight of the Lord's authority. The reeve gathers the entire village in a muddy space outside the church and reads from a scroll. His voice drips with false solemnity as he lists the required contributions from each family. The list is breathtaking in its cruelty. Every family must provide a pig, 2 sacks of their finest wheat, a dozen chickens, 5 extra days of labor to prepare the castle grounds. For a wealthy family, this would be a burden. For you, it is a death sentence. Your family possesses exactly 1 pig, a creature you have been carefully fattening, its meat intended to be your only source of preservation. Through the brutal, lean months of winter, you have 1 ox. You have a small store of grain, most of which is meant to be seed for next year's planting. The reeve's proclamation is not asking for your surplus. It is demanding your survival. A stunned, horrified silence falls over the villagers. You can hear a woman begin to weep softly. This is followed by a low murmur of despair. This isn't a tax. It is a culling. That night, the atmosphere in your hovel is not one of sadness, but of a thick, choking desperation. The options are laid bare, and all of them lead to ruin. Give up the pig, and you face the winter with no meat. Give up the seed grain, and you guarantee starvation next year. Your father, a man you've never seen show more emotion than Grimm. Acceptance slams his fist on the rough-hewn table, a crack of sound that makes you all jump. Your brother, young and foolish, speaks in a hushed, angry whisper about hiding the pig in the woods. An impossible, suicidal idea. Where would you hide it? How would you feed it? The reeve knows exactly what every family owns. Hiding assets is a crime punishable by a public flogging, or worse. There is no choice, and there is no escape. The day of the collection arrives. The reeve, accompanied by 2 of the Lord's thuggish men-at-arms, goes from hovel to hovel, his ledger in hand. He arrives at your home and inspects your pig with the critical eye of a butcher. He nods approvingly. It's a fine pig. It will make a good roast for the wedding feast. He orders it taken. He then inspects your grain stores, plunging his hand into your sack of seed grain and letting the kernels run through his fingers. The finest, he declares, and his men take 2 sacks, leaving you with barely enough to feed yourselves for a month, let alone plant for the next year. He even inspects your handful of chickens and takes the healthiest-looking one's dot as your pig is led away. Squealing in protest, you see your father's face. It is a mask of utter defeat. Everything you have all worked for, every moment of back-breaking labor, has just been erased in a matter of minutes to pay for a party you will never attend. As the reeve moves on to the next hovel, the distant sounds of celebration, the faint notes of a trumpet, the roar of a crowd at a tournament begin to drift down from the castle on the hill. The contrast is a physical blow. They are celebrating with your food, with your future, with your life. You and your family are left standing in the mud, stripped bare, with nothing but the certainty of a long, cold, and hungry winter ahead. The system hasn't just punished you. It has hollowed you out, leaving an emptiness that no amount of watery stew can ever hope to fill. Despair, you realize, is a different kind of hunger, and for the first time, it feels like it might consume you whole. The first weeks of winter are a quiet, creeping horror. The meager rations you have left are dwindling at an alarming rate. The cold is a physical entity, a predator that stalks your family inside your own hovel. Hunger is no longer a dull ache. It is a sharp, constant pain. The distant sounds of merriment from the castle have long since faded, leaving only the whistling of the wind and the gnawing emptiness in your bellies. It is in this profound silence of despair that the most dangerous idea of your life is born. It comes from your brother, whispered in the dead of night so your parents can't hear. Poaching. The Lord's forest, which borders your village, is full of deer. It is the Lord's personal pantry, guarded by his foresters, and the penalty for stealing from it is death. But as your brother points out with a chilling logic, starvation is also death. A slow, miserable death. Poaching offers at least a chance, a sliver of hope in a hopeless world. Fear wars with desperation, and desperation wins. 2 nights later, armed with a makeshift bow your father had hidden from the reeve, you and your brother slip out of the hovel and into the skeletal, moonless dark of the forest. Every snapping twig sounds like a thunderclap. Every shadow seems to hold a threat. This is a different kind of fear from the abstract dread of the reeve or the Lord. This is a primal, immediate terror. You are trespassing on forbidden ground, breaking the most sacred law of the land, the law of property. And in this kingdom, the life of a deer is worth more than the life of a peasant. After what feels like an eternity, you see them, a small group of deer, their shapes ghostly in the gloom. Your brother, his hands steady despite the cold, nocks an arrow. The bowstring creaks. The arrow flies, and with a soft thud, one of the deer stumbles and falls. You've done it. A surge of adrenaline-fueled triumph, so potent it makes you dizzy, washes over you. You have meat, enough meat to last for weeks. You have defied the Lord, defied the reeve, defied the slow death that awaited you. For one glorious, breathless moment, you are not a victim. You are a survivor. The euphoria is short-lived. As you and your brother struggle to drag the heavy carcass through the undergrowth, a torch flares to life in front of you. And behind the torch is the smug, hateful face of the reeve. He isn't alone. 2 burly foresters are with him. He must have suspected. He must have been watching. Your moment of triumph curdles into icy dread. The deer, your symbol of hope, now feels like a tombstone. You are not taken to a cell. You are tied up and thrown into a storage shed until morning. Then, you are dragged to the castle's great hall to face the Lord himself. For the first time, you see Lord Fitzwilliam up close. He is not the roaring monster you imagined. He is a man in his 50s, dressed in fine velvets, his face impassive, his eyes bored. He is looking at you, but he doesn't see you. He sees a disruption, an administrative problem, an annoying bug in the system of his estate. The reeve presents a case with dramatic flair. He holds up the bow, the arrow, and describes your crime in grave detail. There is no trial. There is no defense. You are serfs, his property. You have stolen his other property. The matter is simple. Your brother, seeing the cold finality in the Lord's eyes, does the only brave thing he has left to do. He claims full responsibility. He says he forced you to come with him, that you were too scared to disobey. He is trying to save you. Lord Fitzwilliam listens, then nods slowly, as if weighing a minor business decision. "The law is the law," he says, his voice quiet, but carrying the absolute weight of power. "The man is a poacher. He will be hanged tomorrow at dawn, as an example." He then turns his indifferent gaze to you. "As for the boy, his brother's plea has moved me. He will not hang." A flicker of impossible hope ignites within you, but the Lord extinguishes it with his next words. He will, however, need to be reminded of the cost of such crimes. Let him lose the hand that drew the bow. The end is a blur of pain and horror. Your brother is taken away. You are held down on a wooden block in the castle courtyard. You don't even feel the axe fall at first. Just a sudden, shocking numbness, followed by a pain so white-hot and absolute that your world dissolves into a single piercing scream. You are returned to your hovel, maimed and broken, your life shattered, your brother a ghost waiting for the dawn. Your desperate act of rebellion did not save you. It only accelerated the ruin. You lie on your straw pallet, the stump of your arm wrapped in rags, and you finally understand the fundamental, unbreakable law of your existence. You are not a person. You are a tool, and a tool is not allowed to fight for itself. The system isn't just designed to keep you down. It is designed to crush you, to break you, and to leave you as a terrifying lesson for anyone else who might dare to dream of a life beyond suffering.